Welcome back to ILTV News. Israel has taken a strategic decision to redeploy forces back to Gaza. It's day 450 since the start of the October 7th war, and the move comes after a major anti-terror operation at a Gaza hospital that had been reoccupied by Hamas. The IDF chief says the goal is to increase pressure on Hamas for a hostage deal. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
IDF Chief Halevi says the army will expand operations in Gaza as part of an effort to increase pressure on Hamas to reach a hostage for ceasefire deal with Israel. Halevi said troops will be relocated from Lebanon and other fronts to expand Gaza operations. Some troops deployed along the northern border have already received instructions to head south to Gaza. Over the weekend, 2 long-range rockets were fired by Hamas from the Beit Hanun area. During the war, the army has eliminated almost, but not all, of the Hamas rocket capabilities. The rockets were shot down without causing damage. The IDF responded firmly, ordering urgent evacuation orders for the area where the rockets were fired from. A map was published showing areas that needed to be immediately evacuated, and civilians head south to be out of danger. The rocket fire came amid an IDF offensive in Beit Hanun, and it's believed that the rockets were fired shortly before the launchers fell into IDF hands. The IDF said it has yet to reach the last of the rockets in Hamas possession. Meanwhile, the IDF announced that it's completed its operation at Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia that was being used by Hamas gunmen. During the raid, troops carried out precise operations inside the hospital, during which they arrested wanted men and captured weapons. Over 240 members of Hamas and Islamic Jihad were detained in the operation. Some of the gunmen tried to impersonate patients and medical staff and tried to escape in ambulances. Before launching the operation, the IDF enabled the evacuation of 350 patients, caregivers, and medical personnel to other hospitals.
Well, over the weekend, millions of residents in Israel continued to deal with the attacks and ongoing threats from the Islamic regime in Iran, their Houthi proxy in Yemen. Their missile attack campaign has now spread to parts of Jerusalem and the Dead Sea. ILTV correspondent Shosh Bedrosian is with us with the latest report. Shosh, how are people feeling in Tel Aviv right now?
Well, after days of missile attacks and sirens going off here in Israel, residents continue to be on high alert in case these threats persist. The Houthi war continues, with missiles targeting Jerusalem and Tel Aviv shot down outside Israeli airspace this weekend. The IDF says they intercepted a projectile from Yemen on Saturday after sirens sounded in Jerusalem and surrounding areas. Now, the missile was intercepted outside of Israeli airspace, and no casualties were reported from falling debris. All of this comes after several late-night attacks from the Houthis, including one that landed in Jaffa, injuring 16 people, and another that landed on a school, causing major damage in Ramat Efal. For the first time, the U.S. forces operated the THAAD air defense system in Israel, which intercepted its first ballistic missile launched by the Houthis targeting central Israel. The U.S. also supplied and operated thermal high-altitude area defense, which is operated by about 100 U.S. soldiers. Although the missile triggered sirens across central Israel, the interception prevented any direct impact and briefly disrupted service at Ben Gurion International Airport. The missile attack came shortly after the extensive IDF air operation in Yemen, dubbed Operation Sounds of the Vineyard, targeting Sana'a International Airport and a slew of other Houthi military and economic targets on Thursday evening. After Israel responded to repeated Houthi attacks by striking targets inside of Yemen, the United Nations condemned Israel for its retaliation without making any comment about the Houthis' missile campaign here. Here's what they had to say.
The Secretary General condemns the escalation between Yemen and Israel. Israeli airstrikes today on Sana'a International Airport, the Red Sea ports, and power stations in Yemen are especially alarming.
So, Shosh, what can we anticipate happening next? I mean, the U.S. and Israel are continuing to work together to target the Islamic regime-backed Houthis, but what is Israel doing now?
Right. Well, continued escalation is expected to take place. And right now, Israel reportedly has decided to pursue a more aggressive campaign against the Houthis. Now, the Air Force is expected to increase the scale and frequency of these attacks. And in cooperation with the IDF, U.S., and other countries operating against the Houthis in the Red Sea, those are also likely to expand.
All right. Thank you, Shosh, for that report. Joining us now to discuss the current threats and Israel's next steps, particularly in Gaza, is Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser, Director of the Intelligence Methodology Research Institute at Misgav Institute and the Director of the Project on Regional Middle East Developments at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to start by asking you if you could explain a little bit more about why the IDF needs to redeploy some of these forces in Gaza and what it means for Gaza in the longer term, if anything.
Well, I think we realized even beforehand, but definitely after having to arrest 240 operatives of Hamas in Jabalia area, and after being the target of the launching of rockets from the Beit Hanun area, that we are not yet at the point of defeating Hamas entirely from the military point of view. So more power needs to be invested in this effort. And I was talking about that again and again in the last couple of months. And finally, there's an understanding from the military that this has to be done. And we need to bring in more power in order to convince, first of all, to defeat Hamas, and secondly, to convince Hamas that there is no way out, and they have to show some more flexibility on the talks about the hostages release.
Now, in the raids that occurred this week, we saw at the hospital in Gaza that there were reports of Hamas terrorists pretending to be patients, embedding with civilians. 240 total were arrested. Is this type of behavior consistent with what we've seen from Hamas? And how is the IDF able to determine who is Hamas and who is not on the ground in these situations?
Well, it's very characteristic of Hamas to do that. We saw that in previous cases in which we entered the hospitals, they were trying to impersonate sick people and avoid being arrested by Israel. And it's beyond that. They use the hospitals, the clinics, the schools, everything that is can be used as a place to hide and think that they are going to be protected and immune from Israeli attack as their hideouts and the centers of command. And that is repeating itself again and again and again. So I think that by now everybody understands that when we talk about an Israeli military operation in a hospital, it's not against the patients. It's against the Hamas terrorists who are taking advantage of these places. And the fact that we found there 240 members of Hamas tells you how secure they felt and how they were under the assumption, working under the assumption that Israel is not going to do anything against them at this point.
Absolutely. I think it's important to note as well that each of these individual violations by Hamas are actually war crimes in and of themselves. But moving on to the hostage negotiations, I mean, we've seen a lot of back and forth. But one of the things that was stated by senior Israeli officials was that Israel believes they'll have more maneuverability starting January 20th, the day that Trump takes office. Do you have any guess as to what that may look like? What levers can Israel pull on January 20th that perhaps they cannot now in order to pressure Hamas to surrender, to release the hostages, to end this war?
Well, I think one thing that can be a game changer is that if after January 20th, Israel is going to be able to take control of the delivery of humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in Gaza. Because once we do that, then Hamas loses its main source of income, and may I finally understand that the best way they can do, the best thing they can do about the hostages is to release them in exchange for safety somewhere outside of Gaza. All these efforts that, to convince Hamas that this is the case until now fell short of convincing them that this is the case, because they continue to be in control of the delivery of humanitarian aid and use it in order to fill their coffers. And that's something that delays the ability to reach an agreement. So I hope with the new attitude of the American administration, it will be possible to move in this direction.
All right, well, we are out of time, but thank you, Brigadier General Cooper Wasser, for joining us today, and as always.
Thank you, Emily.
Now, Israel's Ministry of Health has compiled a report detailing the abuse of Israeli hostages kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. The report includes appalling abuse and also details the psychological and physical ramifications of the savage conditions the hostages were held in. Let's take a look at what the report stated.
Beatings, starvation, brandings, sexual assault, psychological torture. This is what Israeli hostages kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th experienced while in captivity, according to a new report from Israel's health ministry, which was submitted to the UN this week. The report consists of hostage testimonies who were released in the November 2023 deal, as well as hostages who were rescued by the IDF. Among the testimonies shared were reports of hostages who were physically tortured, hostages including children who were branded with metal irons and sexually assaulted, and reports of teen hostages who were forced to perform sexual acts on each other. Hostages, including children, also reported being forced to watch gruesome videos of the massacre on October 7th by their captors. The report detailed the alarming long-term health impact of captivity on these hostages, many of whom returned with serious and in some cases life-threatening health issues due to limited exposure to light, starvation, and unsanitary conditions. Hostages have also suffered from anxiety and panic attacks, with some experiencing dissociative states, not understanding or believing that they had actually returned home. Experts state that the return of the remaining hostages is crucial for the already returned hostages, as many are suffering from survivor's guilt and have family or friends who remain in captivity. While hostage negotiations have been ongoing, Hamas has refused to provide a list of remaining hostages to Israel and has stalled in progressing on a U.S. brokered offer, as the U.S. continues to emphasize that the main obstacle to a deal is the Palestinian terror group Hamas. This week, as Israelis gathered for Hanukkah, hostage families gathered in Hostage Square for a candlelighting ceremony and to demand a deal to bring their loved ones home as soon as possible.
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu will today undergo surgery to remove his prostate. The Prime Minister will be hospitalized for several days after the procedure, and Justice Minister Yariv Levin will be acting as the caretaker Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's office made the announcement saying that the surgery will take place after today's cabinet meeting, which will be held as usual. Last Wednesday, Netanyahu, aged 75, underwent an examination at Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem, where doctors discovered an infection in his urinary tract resulting from a benign enlargement of the prostate. Since the diagnosis, Netanyahu has been taking antibiotics to treat the infection. Days after Israel officially took responsibility for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, new details about the remarkable assassination in Tehran have been revealed. Haniyeh was assassinated by Israel July 31st inside his Tehran apartment with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps guest house. The assassination struck a major blow not only to Hamas but also to the Islamic regime in Iran, which was utterly humiliated by the elimination that took place right under their nose, thanks to the incredible intelligence infiltration by Israel. The initial plan had been to take out Haniyeh at the funeral of regime President Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash. But Israel called this off due to the presence of civilians. Instead, Israel waited several months until the inauguration of the Islamic regime president Pezeshkian, when agents placed explosives inside Haniyeh's room near the bed. But the mission was almost blown due to a broken air conditioner in Haniyeh's room. When Haniyeh left to seek help for the air conditioner, Israel was concerned he would switch rooms. However, several hours later, the IRGC sent a repairman to the room to resolve the problem. After Haniyeh returned, Israel waited until 1:30 a.m. when they detonated the device, killing Haniyeh almost instantly with perfectly measured explosives that damaged no others. Initial reports to the Supreme Leader Khamenei claimed that it was an Israeli missile strike which took out Haniyeh, only leading to even further humiliation once it became clear that Haniyeh was assassinated with an IED inside his apartment within an IRGC compound, meaning there must have been cooperation on the Iranian side, something which has led to somewhat of a witch hunt inside the Islamic regime and IRGC leadership to find these moles. Though the regime pledged retaliation similar to how they reacted to the U.S. assassination of IRGC leader Qasem Soleimani, the regime did not act, and only 2 months later, they attacked Israel with a largely thwarted ballistic missile attack. Now, the nation was stunned by the shocking terrorist stabbing murder of an 83-year-old Holocaust survivor on the streets of Herzliya. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
83-year-old Holocaust survivor Ludmila Lipovsky was stabbed multiple times and killed by a lone Palestinian terrorist outside her nursing home in Herzliya. She was waiting for her daughter, who was coming to pick her up from an outing. Security guards from the Postal Authority were first to arrive on the scene. They quickly neutralized the attacker, who was held for police. The victim was rushed to Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv, but was pronounced dead on arrival. The lone terrorist was identified as Ibrahim Shalchab, a resident of the city of Tulkarem in Samaria, who had previously served prison time in Israel. The initial investigation revealed that the suspect was at one time an informer for the Shin Bet. He is now being questioned by the security agency. According to the Yad Vashem database, Ludmila was born in Russia in 1941 and evacuated to Uzbekistan as a small child during the Holocaust.
This year, amid unprecedented challenges ranging from displaced families to IDF reservists on the front lines, Israel's most vulnerable communities are in dire need of support. As Hanukkah approaches, Meir Panim is stepping up with urgent campaigns to provide aid, hope, and a sense of normalcy to those who need it most. Joining me now is Mimi Rosemarin, Director of Global Development at Meir Panim. Mimi, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Well, this year, Israel faces an extraordinary level of need with displaced families and IDF reservists and millions living in poverty. How is Meir Panim's mission responding to these challenges? And why is this Hanukkah campaign particularly urgent?
Absolutely. Meir Panim, we really aim to help each person that reaches out to us for help, and everyone that walks through the doors is welcomed with open arms. After a year of war, people are depleted, their finances, their emotions, and people are facing an extremely heavy load of stress. And so this year for Hanukkah, we really wanted to shake things up and bring extra joy to those that are really in this time of most need and in their moment of crisis, particularly.
Now, this Hanukkah, Meir Panim is delivering thousands of packages, hosting festive celebrations, organizing special events. What do these initiatives mean for the people you serve, and how do they help restore a sense of hope and normalcy?
In times of need and in times of crisis, our inclination might be to say, you know what, it's a war, let's tone it all down, people are really suffering. And what we've heard from our patrons and our most brave fighters on the front lines is that just the opposite. It is in these times that they really need us to respond, to remind them and to remind our communities that our lives and our security is worth fighting for. And I think that really applies to the work that Meir Panim is doing over this Hanukkah by having these festive parties, by reminding people there is joy in life, and we can take a moment from the serious crisis that we're facing and enjoy togetherness, and to appreciate the fact that we're able to continue on our mission to help bring light to each person in need in Israel during these times.
Meir Panim provides substantial support to IDF soldiers and their families, from morale-boosting events to essential gear. How do these acts of support impact the soldiers and their loved ones, especially during a time like this on Hanukkah?
Absolutely. We are really feeling, as I said earlier, the toll of the year of war on the stress in our communities. And what we're hearing is that the fact that we're able to keep going and to keep providing these events, and even to do things for families of reservists, like sending pizza to families in Sderot that have their fathers and husbands in reserves every week, and times where we can put together a party at one of our branches or for troops on the front line. It's a reminder that to our communities that we stand behind them, and that the community of Meir Panim supporters around the world is doing everything they can to try to ease their burden in any way we can.
Now, Meir Panim's campaign emphasizes that every dollar can make a difference. How do these contributions directly translate into help on the ground? And what message do they send to those facing these hardships in Israel today?
At Meir Panim, we have a crazy, small, and lean staff. And we can do this, and we can do our mission and accomplish all the work we do, providing 86 cents to every dollar directly to our patrons in need because we keep our staff and our overhead so low. So we really see ourselves as important messengers for everyone that wants to do good and wants to provide for people in need here in Israel. We do this with the help of 7,000 volunteers annually and with really intense partnerships with other nonprofits here in Israel. So what we really do is we try to take every amount donated and try to maximize it. And we find this equally important to our mission of alleviating poverty and hunger and alleviating stress in this difficult time here in Israel. We find it our mission to honor each donation that we receive by doing everything we can to give as most to the people who need it.
Mimi Rosemarin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us. It's always a pleasure to share Mayor Penny's stories with your community, and we look forward to being in touch in better days.
Well, a 10-year-old boy in Jerusalem has uncovered a stunning 200-year-old golden medallion in the historic neighborhood of Ein Kerem, shedding light on its rich Christian heritage. More from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
A 10-year-old student recently made an incredible discovery in the Ein Kerem neighborhood of Jerusalem. Norai Nir found a beautiful golden cross medallion crafted using a micro-mosaic technique. Experts believe the medallion could be up to 200 years old. Although it's not considered antiquity by law, the Israel Antiquities Authority describes the medallion as unique. This is largely due to its intricate manufacturing process. The piece was made by setting glass and tiny colorful precious stones with remarkable precision to form miniature patterns. This technique originated in Rome around 1800 and remained in use until the early 20th century. The medallion's significance also lies in where it was found, Ein Kerem, a site deeply revered in Christian tradition. Ein Kerem is associated with the town in Judah, mentioned in the New Testament, where John the Baptist was born. It is also where his mother Elizabeth is said to have met Mary, the mother of Jesus, while both were pregnant. According to Christian tradition, this meeting occurred near a neighborhood well, which some believe still exists in Ein Kerem today.
דורות של צליינים, עולי רגל נוצרים, שהגיעו מרחבי אירופה במסע מפרך של חודשים ושנים, דרך הצליינות שלהם עברה בעין כרם.
Dr. Amit Re'im from the Israel Antiquities Authority reflected on the discovery, saying one could almost picture the moment the pendant was lost. Now, about a century later, it has been found by a curious young boy.
ILTV and Ynet News are set to release their highly anticipated Lights of Hope Hanukkah and New Year's event tomorrow morning, December 30th. The 2-hour virtual event will feature a special message from the President of Israel alongside interviews with leading ministers, security experts, philanthropists, and innovators. Together, they will share their vision of hope for 2025. For updates about the event and to receive a link to log on and join us, scan the QR code. Well, Israelis are celebrating Hanukkah, and despite seemingly endless tragedy, some Israelis are doing all they can to turn that tragedy into triumph. In Hostage Square, a menorah was built from missile fragments fired at Israel by Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the Islamic regime in Iran. Not far from Tel Aviv, another menorah was fashioned from the remnants of an Iranian ballistic missile fired at Israel several months ago. For many Israelis, Hanukkah serves as a reminder of how, despite the odds, the state of Israel and the Jewish people can drive out darkness with light. And with that, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Rainy showers are expected around most of the country tonight, with lows of around 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we will see more rainy showers alongside steady top temperatures, seeing highs of about 15 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader, wishing you a happy holiday season, and thank you for watching.